Most guitarists are told that improvisation is all about memorizing scale shapes and finding licks that work inside of them. But there's a problem with that. That approach hits a ceiling. Eventually, everything you play starts to sound robotic, disconnected, and predictable. And it doesn't actually help you understand what you're doing on the fretboard. And this is because improvisation isn't about shapes, and it's definitely not about copying and pasting licks on the fretboard. Improvisation is about expression. So today I'm going to show you 3 simple steps that you can take to unlock the ability to express yourself with improvisation on the fretboard. And the best part is you can do a lot of this stuff with things you already know how to play on the guitar. Now, I've been playing the guitar for 12 years at this point. I went to music school, got a degree. I've been teaching for 3 years at this point, and I play gigs regularly. I help intermediate guitarists who feel stuck with learning licks and just playing up and down shapes without actually sounding like themselves on the instrument. So if you feel like you're someone who can play, but you're not really saying anything, this video is for you. If you're a beginner who hasn't learned your kind of 5 pentatonic shapes yet, unfortunately this video is not going to be for you, although you are still welcome to watch. First, let's dive into what most guitarists get wrong when it comes to improvising. Improvisation on the guitar is just like having a conversation. So, in order to understand improvisation, let's make sure we know what conversation actually is. The dictionary definition of a conversation is a talk, an especially informal one between 2 or more people in which news and ideas are exchanged. Now, let's translate that into music. Musical improvisation is a musical dialogue where unplanned sounds are exchanged in real time. The reason I make this point is because everyone watching this video has had a conversation at some point in their lives, and some of you are probably quite good at it. If you can have a conversation, you have the exact set of skills you need in order to improvise on the guitar. It's all about the ability to express a point and adapt in real time. Let's quickly go over some things that are going to ruin a conversation, and we'll translate that into how that's going to ruin improvisation as well. One thing we definitely don't do when we're having a conversation is pull out a dictionary and find words we can use to respond. And we definitely don't go in alphabetical order, listing random words to respond to someone's question. Well, that's exactly what you're doing whenever you play up and down a scale shape. You're just playing all these kind of random notes, but you don't really know what any of them mean, right? They're technically correct, like all the words in the dictionary are technically correct, but you don't know which word fits the correct context that you're speaking in. That's exactly what we're doing whenever you just go up and down a scale shape. You're just throwing out random words in a dictionary, and that doesn't create a good conversation. In fact, it's what makes someone immediately want to leave if you just pull out a dictionary, right? It's wrong, it's incorrect. A second thing that you definitely don't do when you improvise or when you have a conversation with someone is you don't speak in quotes, right? Now, using a quote at the right time in the right context can be very interesting and very impactful to a conversation. However, if the only way you know how to respond to someone is by using your favorite quotes from like Lord of the Rings or something like that, the person is going to get very, very uncomfortable with you and they're going to walk away and the conversation is completely finished. Now, the reason I bring up the point of quotes is because that's exactly what we're doing whenever we try and memorize licks. We're just pulling out strings of quotes. And again, that's not how you speak and express an idea. You're not always just copying what other people have said. You're generating your own thoughts, right? So we need to get out of the habit of just only ever using kind of licks to improvise through chord changes, right? We need to get to the point where we can come up with our own ideas. And it's not as hard as you think. So let's go into the first step to creating your own musical ideas. I want you to think of chords as the topic of your improvisation. So in the same way that every conversation, it exists around a topic. You exchange ideas around a certain topic. Let's say you're having a conversation about dinosaurs. Whenever I mention the dinosaurs, there are going to be a couple ideas around that topic that immediately come to your mind, right? You probably think of like a T-Rex, like a meteor that made the dinosaurs extinct, Or maybe you think about like Jurassic Park. The point is, there are going to be some immediate ideas that come to your head when a topic is mentioned. Well, again, like I said before, the chords are the topic of musical improvisation. What are the most immediate notes that come to mind when you think of a chord? Let's take the example of G minor. Let's say we're improvising over G minor. What's the most immediately obvious note that we can play over G minor? The most immediately obvious note is going to be G. I can play that over here on the fretboard on the 5th fret of the D string, right? So I got my G over there. What's the next most immediate note after G? Well, if we're playing G minor, probably the minor third. So we can play the minor third over here. I've got these two notes. These are the most immediately obvious ideas around G minor. Now, whenever you start a conversation, you kind of have to start with small talk. This is what guitarists don't understand. They try and just launch into these shapes and play every single note, but we forget that we have to start with small talk before we can get to that kind of stuff. We have to earn the right to play all of these notes first by being good at playing just a couple at a time. So, step one is focusing on phrasing with musical small talk. If you can't figure out how to phrase just these two most obvious notes, you're never going to be able to say anything with everything in the entire scale shape. So we're going to focus on our articulation, so how we approach the root note. I can slide into it from like a fret below, and then I can do a bit of vibrato, like over here, and I can do the same thing for this minor third. And you also have to focus on rhythm with your phrasing as well. So do you want to hold the note? Do you want to kind of make it staccato and punchy? Do you want to kind of use triplets and like bounce between the kind of root note and the minor third? Again, if you can't have interesting phrasing for just two notes, you're never going to be able to get to the point where you can have interesting phrasing with all the other notes on the fretboard. So the very first step is to play just the most obvious notes for your chord. So that's going to be the root and the minor third of your chord. And here's what that would sound like over G minor. Now, just like how a conversation will flow between many different topics, music flows in the exact same way as well. Maybe your conversation started by talking about dinosaurs, but eventually it kind of flowed, and now you're talking about the topic of like animals that have gone extinct, right? There are related ideas in which the topics change. It's the exact same with music, but instead of like kind of abstract ideas, right, we're using chords. The topic of the chords change. So let's say we start with like G minor, but then the topic gets changed back to D minor. We're going to repeat the exact same process whenever a new chord comes around. Find the most obvious ideas. That'd be your root note, which I can play here, my D, right? This is D. And then the minor third of that root note, that's going to be over here on the 6th fret of the B string. So let's find that on the fretboard over here. I've got my root note there, and then I have my minor third right there. So we're going to do the exact same thing. Focus on phrasing these two, right? And again, you have to start with a bit of musical small talk. Don't feel like you have to use an entire scale shape. If you can't make these two notes sound nice, you're never going to be able to make an entire shape sound nice. So, the easy part is just playing these two notes. The difficult part is connecting these ideas together. And in order to connect them together, you have to be able to have the ability to think ahead in the future. You have to know where the chord is changing to next before you're going to play that idea. So I will start with like G minor over here. And I knew that I was going to move over to this spot over here. You have to find the territory before you actually really need to use it. And again, I can connect all of these ideas together now, right? It's just I got these two notes for D minor over here, and I got these 2 notes for G minor over here. It's actually not too difficult to connect them together when you actually know where you're going. So in order to connect these ideas together, you have to plan the route before you kind of get there, or at least not plan. Again, improvisation is unplanned, but you have to know that route is available to you. So step 2 is to repeat the exact same process for the next chord in your progression. Just start with the musical small talk. Find the root and the minor third, figure out how to phrase around that, and then connect these ideas together. Here's what it sounds like when I do that. So once you can express your ideas with the musical equivalent of small talk by just kind of phrasing with 2 notes, we're ready to start adding in a couple more notes. So let's add in the most next obvious note around a chord. That's going to be the 5th. So we've covered the root, the minor third, now we're adding in the 5th. For most of you watching, you probably understand that a root, a third, and a 5th, that's a triad. So we're going to find these triad shapes on the fretboard now. The reason triads are so good is because they're actually quite easy to visualize. It's a bit difficult for us to kind of visualize these like roots and thirds in these isolated places across the fretboard, but it's easier for us to kind of wrap our heads around the idea of a triad, right? It's a shape that we're kind of more familiar with. So let's map out where that triad is for both of these chords. So we had G minor over here, and I played the root note, the third. I can find the 5th right underneath it on the B string. So I have that over here for my G minor. Now let's do the same for D minor. I had my root, my third. I can find a 5th on the D string on the 7th fret over here. So now I have these places where I can express a bit more, right? So let's say I was phrasing around G minor. I've got these extra notes now. And then I just go to D minor. I kind of just added in a random note there. It doesn't really matter what notes you add in between to get from one chord to the next. As long as you land on those obvious ideas, those roots, thirds, and 5ths, it's going to sound musical. I can play any note that I want in between. As long as I finish on those triads, it's going to sound a lot more musical. And again, triads are so brilliant because they're very easy to visualize on the fretboard. It can be hard to remember all these like root notes, these thirds as kind of individual points, and it's difficult to remember all the note names on the guitar and also understand like which chord has each note. If you just know these triad shapes, it becomes so much easier to find this information on the fretboard. So here's what things sound like when I expand a tiny bit more, add in 1 note and start phrasing with these triads. So now that we can phrase with just 3 notes, we're ready to start thinking about the scale shape. Again, remember how I said at the beginning, improvisation isn't about shapes, it's about expressing ideas. If you can express the most obvious ideas with those 3 notes first, only then are you ready to start using the full potential of those entire scale shapes. So this is where things kind of get pretty cool. We're going to look at where these triads live inside of our pentatonic scale shapes. But before we do that, let's quickly break down why they exist inside of pentatonic shapes. So there's going to be some really simple theory that's going on over here. So let's take a minor triad. We all understand that to create a minor triad, you need a root, a minor third, and you need a perfect 5th. That's pretty simple. We all understand that already. Now, let's look at the intervals that we need to create a minor pentatonic scale. So we need a root, we need a minor third. So if I was playing G minor, I've got root, minor third. Then I need a perfect fourth. Then I need a perfect fifth. And then finally, I need a minor seventh. And then it goes back to the root again. Now, if we look at these two ideas over here, we've got a triad and a pentatonic scale. You can see that the pentatonic scale is just an extension upon this triad, right? We're still keeping that root, still keeping that minor third, still keeping that fifth. We're just adding in two more notes, right? Plus two. We're just adding in a perfect fourth and a minor seventh. We're still keeping that foundation of the root, third, and fifth, right? So this means that whenever you learn a pentatonic shape, there's also going to be a triad hiding inside of it because they share these intervals in common. So your triad shapes are going to line up with your pentatonic shapes. Now, let's understand where these actually fit inside of pentatonic shapes. So let's take this G minor one first. You can see this on my screen over here on the fretboard diagram. This is shape 1 of the pentatonic. You can see this G minor root position triad exists in shape 1 of G minor. Now, our next triad was D minor, right? You can see on my screen over here that like the D minor triad exists inside of shape 4 of D minor. So this shows us all the extra notes we can use to kind of phrase around them. And then I'm going to show you another diagram over here. This is both of those shapes next to each other. So I've got over here, I've got shape 1 of like G minor and all the notes inside of that box. And then right next to it, you can kind of see like shape 4, kind of in this bit over here, of D minor. And that shows me like all these possible notes that I can use to combine both of them together. So it's one thing knowing where these triad shapes actually sit inside of scale shapes. But again, the entire scale shape can kind of distract you a bit. I think it's more important to look at the notes that are above and below these triad shapes. And again, we kind of have to understand where they fit inside of scale shapes to give us a bit of context. But here's what I mean. Take this G minor triad. Look at the notes that we can use above and below this point over here. So I can use this note on the 7th fret, and I can use this note below it on the 3rd fret. So let's say I wanted to phrase around that. It's really easy, right? And again, I've got these couple of extra notes like over here inside of the pentatonic box. But I'm phrasing around that shape. I'm centered and grounded around that point. And again, let's look at this kind of bit over here of the triad on the G string. I've got this note above over here on the 5th fret. And also if I know my pentatonic positions, I know that underneath shape 1, I've got shape 5 below it. And that's going to be this like open string. Right? Sounds really nice. I can combine both of those together now. And again, like I don't have to memorize any licks to do this. I just understand what I'm doing on the fretboard, right? I understand the triads and how to phrase around them, and I can create whatever I want, whenever I want. It's always unplanned. I don't have to learn and memorize a bunch of licks. And again, let's look at this point over here of the B string. So I've got my fret above, so the note above of the G minor pentatonic on the 5th fret, the 6th fret of the B string. And if you know pentatonic shape 5, underneath it we're going to have the 1st fret on the B string. And I can kind of phrase around that point. Again, I'm kind of keeping it grounded around that 5th of the triad. So when I combine all of them together, I can create a really interesting phrase around G minor. Again, just kind of coming up with stuff on the spot. I'm not really planning what I'm doing, but I don't have to plan because I understand how to take advantage of this triad to make things sound musical. And you can also get some more interesting sounds out of this by speaking more with the instrument. A lot of people, they feel like they kind of have to play every single note, but they never actually feel like they're actually saying anything on the instrument. When you play around these triad notes, you can actually speak with the instrument and hold a note. So I can go like, and the phrase is going to sound nice because I know that these are the important notes, right? I can rely upon the fact that they're always going to sound nice over the chord that I'm playing over the top of. So I can just hold that note. And again, I'm playing like slower. A lot of people, they're confused about how to get this kind of more tasteful, slow phrasing. Like a lot of people, they really like someone like David Gilmour. They really admire their playing. They don't know how to kind of get there. It's all in these triad shapes. Again, we're going to repeat the exact same process for this D minor as well. Now again, I know this kind of chart might be a little bit confusing, but we have like the 4th position of the D minor pentatonic that's kind of around this bit here. It might look a bit confusing just because I've combined it with the 1st position of the G minor pentatonic. But again, it makes sense when you start thinking about using all of these together for these 2 chords in your chord progression. But again, let's go over D minor. Got this D minor triad shape. It exists inside of that 4th pentatonic scale position. But again, don't let the whole box blind you. It's more important to think about the notes above and below these kind of triad points. So let's take this note on the D string. The note below I can use in that pentatonic shape is going to be on this 5th fret. And if you know all of your pentatonic shapes, after position 4, we've got position 5, and that's going to be like over here on the 10th fret. So I can phrase around that by going like below and above this way. I can do the same thing for the G string as well. 7th fret on the G, but again I can find the note of the pentatonic shape below, and I can also find that pentatonic note above as well. But again, I'm always returning to this point of the triad. Again, let's try doing the exact same thing for the B string. I can see that in shape 4, I've got this pentatonic note above. And then in like, this will kind of be like shape 3 of D minor over here on the 3rd fret of the B string. And again, I'm always kind of returning around this point of the triad shape to make it sound musical. So, when I focus on phrasing around these triads, looking for notes above and below, here's what it sounds like when I put everything all together. The thing is, everything that I've shown you today works with any kind of triad shape that you can think of. You can use these ideas to mix major and minor sounds together, and you can also use this idea to unlock the ability to use the entire fretboard without getting lost or confused. So let me show you very quickly how this kind of works. We all know that like we have triad shapes, and they can be inverted to different kind of positions all the way across the fretboard. I can do that with all the chords in my chord progression, and I can find like new spots to play that same chord progression. So like it was G minor to D minor. Let's try playing that over here. So like G minor to D minor, and I can do the exact same stuff. And G. So using these triads really unlocks the entire fretboard, and it gives you a deep understanding of the instrument that's a lot higher level than just kind of memorizing scale shapes and copying and pasting licks. Now, if you're an intermediate guitarist who is tired of learning useless licks and you're kind of stuck inside the pentatonic box and you want to actually start playing through the chord changes instead of faking your way through the chord changes, then head to howigotgoodatguitar.com to solve this problem. I have a video on there that explains the curriculum I have been personally guiding guitarists through to unlock the ability to creatively express themselves on the instrument. If you think that's what you need, you can book a free assessment call with me on my website. Worst case scenario, you book the call and you get some real clarity on how to improve on the instrument. Best case scenario, you become my next success story, just like Cameron, who used to noodle around with pentatonic shapes. He's now gigging, he's soloing with confidence, and he's making music that actually excites him. But if you're not quite ready to leave YouTube yet, then I get it. I've linked a couple more videos over here that's going to help you keep building upon using these triads inside of your playing.